Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about why protein overfeeding tends to pair very well with intermittent fasting. And I mean this specifically for people who are trying to get very, very lean. Obviously, this assumes you are strength training and on good training programming and training hard. That first and foremost, that always needs to be discussed when we're talking about body composition. And I almost shouldn't need to say that. But again, people will take stuff out of context if you don't say it. They'll say, well, I incorporated this and I've been jogging every day and I'm just looking stringy. It's like, well, yeah, obviously you're not doing any serious lifting. I'm assuming you're training your whole body when I make these recommendations with weights, okay? Like what you see me doing in this video, although probably not necessarily quite this heavy. But I digress. Over to the point. This is a time-proven approach. And when I say time-proven, I don't mean decades. I do mean, though, over a decade. This is stuff that we saw guys doing due to the lean gains approach from Martin Burkham. We've seen other people implement this sort of idea. And I think where it's interesting, because a lot of times people are like, oh, this didn't work as well for me as I thought, because I don't think intermittent fasting by itself works that amazingly well. It does for a segment of the population, right? I'm based upon my experience, okay? My personal experience, my N=1, observing people I know in the fitness community and other people. Intermittent fasting works for about maybe 30% of people, maybe a third. It seems to work pretty effectively. They get great appetite control. They have great diet adherence. A lot of the people who do it can even be a little looser on their diet because they limit themselves to, say, a 6 or an 8 hour feed window. And when they do that, what happens? They just eat less. They eat less. Now, the issues that we run into with it are, again, protein timing is a minor concern there. And I've seen plenty of good experts point out that, in theory, we don't have good evidence that protein timing is that important for muscle growth or even muscle preservation. But it's reasonable to assume that it is. Okay, meaning you do need to be careful with smaller feed windows, particularly with protein. But here's the thing that I would point out. There's a couple sets of studies that I would mention briefly in that topic. Number one, the very recent one, and at this point, it made headlines so much everywhere and was the most talked about thing that week. I'm sure you've already read it. And if you haven't, you can find it in 10 seconds and you'll find 1 million people talking about it. And that was the study showing that with larger protein intakes, right? When they're like, what happens if we do 100 grams of protein in one sitting versus, say, that traditional, whatever, 20 or 30, that a lot of people used to think was the cap. No one's believed that in over a decade. By the way, that's been debunked in the lab a long time ago. But this really solidified it. What they noticed is that when people ate a large amount of protein like that in one meal, they didn't necessarily get more protein synthesis. Okay? They had it for much longer. All right, do we understand the implication there? It extended the muscle protein synthesis window of that meal like threefold. It tripled the time of it. As you would expect because the amount of protein was over tripled. All right, you see where we're going with this? So if we consume a very large amount of protein over a couple meals inside of a feed window, if we extrapolate that data, could we assume muscle protein synthesis is going to stay elevated for a very long period of time, even though you're fasting every day for diet adherence? Yeah, that's reasonable. Okay, what's our other than concern also with the intermittent fasting? People point out, yes, you do burn more fat during the fasting window. This is not in question. Problem is that you just regain more fat during the feed window because we gain and lose fat every day. People don't realize that. It's dynamic. Right? If you are maintaining perfect body weight and perfect homeostasis, you lose a little body fat every day and you regain a little bit every day. There's flow in and out. All right, this is where why this method works. It gets into a little metabolic trickery. When you look at the protein overfeeding studies, when people start hitting stuff like, 4 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, so that would be for someone like me, like 400 grams. What happened in the studies? Even when in a calorie surplus, they all lose body fat. Across the board. When people force feed massive amounts of protein, what happens? They lose body fat. Pretty consistently. See where we're going here? What happens if you combine this with a plant-heavy diet with a lot of fiber? Man. If you do a diet that would generally allow you to help with recomp anyways, your diet is pretty much plant-based polyunsaturated fats, lots of fiber, lots of fruits and vegetables, and then you force a lot of lean protein down with it. Okay, and you protein overfeed in that manner, and then you're doing it inside of only a feed window. But you make sure you hit that extremely high protein. Well, one, you're probably not going to get hungry. Number two, you're also probably not going to necessarily regain body fat. The protein itself at those high amounts seems to cause almost fat loss anyways. So if you're doing that inside of kind of your feed window, diet control is going to become very easy. Losing body fat is going to become very easy. I would venture to say that this sort of setup, because I always tell people I don't think intermittent fasting without taking stuff is necessarily always good for recomposition, like a lot of people think it is. I would be reluctant on that one. But in the presence of protein overfeeding, I think absolutely. Okay, I think that sort of approach can absolutely do so. Now, here's the issue. Sort of strict lifestyle does this require? A lot of people, that's the thing with intermittent fasting, though, they find that it's not strict. They just don't have to worry about food earlier in the day and then they eat. All right, that works. But to do a setup like this to really make it work like I'm talking about, you're going to have to force down a lot of protein in that feed window, which might require shakes and stuff for a lot of people, and that's fine. So that would be the downside of this sort of approach. I think it would work. It works brilliantly well. We've seen it in the real world plenty of times. People successfully used it with the really high protein intakes with the intermittent fasting, and they get real lean and they keep muscle, right? I've seen a lot of people look pretty dang jacked after doing this without necessarily dropping their calories as low as you would think. Because again, protein overfeeding does some interesting stuff. So I've seen people do it on still, decently high calorie intakes, which is good for muscle growth, good for recomposition then. Again, the downside being it's relatively strict. You're going to have to adhere to it to make it work. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.